It seems like part of human nature is the necessity, the need to have scapegoats, people who must bear the brunt of the wrongdoings of others. History is riddled with famous scapegoats: Leon Trotsky, Yoko Ono, and Catherine O'Leary's cow. That's a thing. Go check it out. But in professional wrestling right now, the scapegoat, the top scapegoat, is none other than Jack Perry, who has taken on the full-on moniker of scapegoat. Hell, he even has a full goat head, just to make sure you understand the point here. And he's been at the center of some controversy this week due to some reporting that's been happening regarding his status with AEW. Now, before we go too deep into this, let's just recontextualize. Let's refresh our brains with some cliff notes on how we got to this point right here. Jack Perry is no stranger to headlines. He hasn't been a stranger to headlines ever since he demanded CM Punk to cry him a river at AEW All In at Wembley last year, an action which ended up shaking AEW up to its core, I guess. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's also very true. By doing that, CM Punk got fired, Jack Perry got suspended, and he has since shown back up, he being Jack Perry, not in AEW though, but in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He tore up his contract, his AEW contract, in a New Japan ring, which led a lot of us to believe that, the train is back on its rails, everything's fine. We're literally back on track here. AEW, essentially here's from what we surmised, they sent Perry over to New Japan, partner promotion New Japan, to have a little excursion, while creative plans on Dynamite and Collision might have been a little slim for him. That was the assumption. Right up until earlier this week, when Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer hopped on Wrestling Observer Radio and said the following. Essentially, Tony is really mad at him because he cost him CM Punk, so he's getting the blame. He probably should have been suspended for a month or two. Where are we at? 7 months now? It's ridiculous. Punishment doesn't fit the crime at this point. I mean, it's like it's his fault because the other guy lost his mind. So that sent shockwaves pretty much everywhere, where people are like, why isn't Dave understanding that this is a work? We've all understood now that the suspension is over, that there's not necessarily any ill will. This is such a strange thing for Dave to say. Is he getting worked himself? I think this turned out to be a situation where Dave knew more than he had previously reported and just let some stuff slip out without any further context, because that's how Dave's brain works. And this theory holds some water because then Dave elaborated a lot more in the Observer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter this past Friday. This is what he had to say. Regarding Jack Perry, who has now been gone for 7 months since the incident with CM Punk at Wembley Stadium and people thinking he's been fired. He's still under contract and obviously is working only for New Japan, while my belief is that he should have been punished for doing that line at the Wembley show, Real Glass, Crimea River, which led to the confrontation with CM Punk and resulted in CM Punk fired. But 2 months should have been long enough. If he had actually physically started the fight, that would have been a different story. Tony Khan has never answered any questions regarding Perry. The way we've heard it was that he was sent home after Wembley and never heard back from Khan. He apologized, kept texting him about how he never meant to cause any trouble and was sorry. He did hear from the company through lawyers. Then they talked and he apologized to Khan, but he still hasn't been brought back. What they are doing now in Japan is storyline to lead to an eventual return. So there's a little more meat to the bone here, and more meat was added to this bone. You can't really do that, but nonetheless, bear with me with this analogy here, because finally, Brian Alvarez wrote an article on the Observer Figure 4 website regarding this whole situation, adding more speculation and to a degree confusion to this whole story. This is what he had to say. Jack Perry both disputes the claim that he continually apologized or asked for forgiveness in the months following his backstage fight with CM Punk at last August's AEW All-In, or that there are any current plans for an AEW return. According to Perry, he didn't hear from AEW head Tony Khan for 2 months following All-In at London's Wembley Stadium. Perry said he never texted to say he was sorry and told Khan's lawyers he would not initiate first contact. Khan finally set up an in-person meeting before Full Gear in Los Angeles, where they discussed plans to bring him back last December. However, after Punk returned to WWE at Survivor Series, those plans were scrapped. Perry, who wanted to work Wrestle Kingdom but was unable for logistical reasons, then worked with Rocky Romero and Khan to set up his current New Japan Pro Wrestling run. At this point, Perry is still under AEW contract. He asked for a release but was denied. But there are still no plans to bring him back. He hasn't talked to Khan in months, nor cleared anything he has done in storyline for New Japan, like him tearing up the AEW contract or his use of the term scapegoat. Now that's a lot of back and forth public relationing going on there, with a lot of these elements sounding like a spouse icing the other after catching them cheating. There is so much he said, she said here that it's hard to know what's entirely true, who's saying the truth, but one would expect in these type of situations, one would expect the truth to be somewhere in the middle. All of this is leading folks to call this a worked shoot, and I think there's some truth to that. I think it's more of a situation where they're taking some truth, some shoot elements, and working it into a storyline as opposed to an outright worked shoot. I think Perry is trying to work it this way. Look, I understand that a lot of people are sort of pulling their hair out and, blaming Tony Khan for not doing things. Look, there are things we can glean from this to help make sense of what is a work and what is a shoot. And essentially that's what I kind of want to talk about here. So let's start with the work elements. If we were to break this down, let's start with the work elements. What is a work in this situation? Perry no longer being with AEW. Complete and utter work at this point. Dave confirmed that he was still under contract and they wouldn't be doing all of this. They wouldn't still be referencing AEW so casually and whatnot if he wasn't still under contract. The suspension has become a work. I think it was, I sincerely believe it was a shoot at first. Especially considering that, that there was back and forth, lawyers were involved and so on and so forth. This was absolutely a shoot at some point, but it no longer is. I don't think there's any real suspension still ongoing at this point, despite the fact that he's sending his talent to a partner promotion. If Jack Perry was still being disciplined, I don't think the company would be sending him elsewhere to do things and, stay active or whatnot. A suspension would be, I assume, a suspension across the board and you're just sitting home, you're benched, right? So I'm pretty sure at this point, the suspension is a work. It's a work. Also, this instance that they're saying that AEW has no plans for Jack Perry. That's highly improbable. That there's no plans for bringing him back and whatnot. What did Alvarez say here? There are still no plans to bring him back. That's very improbable to a degree, anyway. Maybe in the short term, right now, there's no plans to bring Jack Perry back. Maybe with everything going on in AEW right now, with the 3 big signees. The impending return of MJF. Maybe this isn't the ideal time to bring Perry back. They just want to find the right moment. There could be a bunch of reasons, but I think it's very improbable, right, that they don't have any plans to bring him back, that they don't want to bring him back, especially if Jack Perry is working with Rocky Romero and who is a liaison between AEW and New Japan. Well, Rocky's now officially AEW office, but you know what I mean. If he's working with Rocky and AEW wants to maintain a good relationship with New Japan, I don't think this is a situation where New Japan is coming in trying to poach some talent here and be like, hey, let's bring this guy over and do the thing, right? And all this talk about, that Jack Perry's been doing things without clearing it with AEW. I also think that's highly improbable. I'm fairly confident when I tell you that AEW is highly involved in what the wrestlers do outside of the promotion. This isn't pro wrestling Noah. They want to keep an eye on things. They want to make sure that things go their way. I'm pretty sure AEW has a hand in what's going on in New Japan right now. Now, as for the shoot elements, I think Tony Khan icing him out is absolutely a shoot. I think that's legitimate. It's something that TK has done before, where there's precedent for doing this with other suspensions, like with the Bucks. Sammy Guevara just cuts off all communication, has the lawyers play intermediary, and it's just part of a pattern of behavior that we've seen with Tony Khan in the past. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all, and it would make complete sense. Whether they did apologize, which I have a tendency to believe, that Jack Perry did apologize, which I have a tendency to believe. I do have a tendency to believe that Jack Perry tried texting out to him. Despite the fact that Perry denies everything. Perry's comments to Brian Alvarez feel like they're advancing a story more than anything else. Maybe advancing a storyline that they might capitalize on once Perry returns, where he's disgruntled, he's unhappy, so on and so forth. Because because I feel that Jack Perry taking the blame for someone else here is indeed a shoot as well, right? The scapegoat thing, I think it's exactly tied to that, tied to the fact that CM Punk had the blow up, but Perry gets punished, and maybe a little severely for it. Perry referenced it in New Japan promos as well. He even said that he asked for his release. It wasn't granted. And even, I think it was Alvarez who talked about it again. Yeah, it was Alvarez who talked about him getting his release. So, I think the scapegoat thing, the idea of Perry being punished for someone else's blow up, I think that is also very much a shoot part of all of this. Just as, Jack Perry being bitter is absolutely plausible. And, why wouldn't he be? Again, he got the brunt of it. Sure, maybe he was a little provocateur in the situation, saying the line on television, he was absolutely poking the bear, but he didn't expect the bear to come out swinging like he did and just completely lose his mind. I think ultimately that CM Punk was on the cusp of it regardless. But nonetheless, I don't blame Jack Perry for feeling bitter in regards to the CM Punk, in regards to this, to the aftermath of the CM Punk blow up. If he was the one who took the blame as hard as he did, that he was no longer in communication with Tony Khan, and he was being ignored, iced out. We'll just have to see. And another shoot element here that we can't ignore here is Tony Khan's love of CM Punk. There is no denying that for Tony Khan, bringing CM Punk into AEW was an achievement. It was something huge for him. He just absolutely loved the man himself and was grateful to have him around. They got along swimmingly. There were, I've heard multiple reports regarding how well Tony Khan and CM Punk got together. You know, they have pretty much the same vision for pro wrestling at the same time. So they really got along well. And Tony Khan had that on his shoulders as well, had that achievement to have brought back CM Punk after years of exile, self-imposed exile from the wrestling business. He was the guy who brought him back. Well, ultimately, you know, it turned into a stepping stone for CM Punk to go back to where he really wanted to be, and good for him. But I'm mentioning this because it's maybe a lot of people are seeing this as an overreaction. I know a lot of people are thinking that Tony Khan is going a little far on this. A lot of people saying he's not going far enough. But the reason why maybe the suspension and the punishment seemed a little overblown was due to this. You cannot underestimate, you cannot under-evaluate the amount of love Tony Khan had for CM Punk, and there was probably a lot of that came into the situation. So, look, Jack Perry will eventually be back in the company. I think that's inevitable. The excursion is probably going to do him some good. You know, stretch his legs, see how things operate elsewhere. You know, maybe he'll see how good he has it over at the other place, or maybe he'll see how bad he has it over at the other place. You know, these are very eye-opening situations here, and it'll be good for him, you know, as a performer as well. You know, especially if he wants to come back as a heel. Look, I have no love for the House of Torture stuff, but I can't deny that if Jack Perry wants to polish off his heel persona, this is going to go swimmingly for him. But we'll see how all that goes. I guess I can't help but feel that we're still living off the specter of the brawl out from 2 years ago, and then Wembley last year, and it's going to be, you know, and as we continue to live under that specter, at least the specter of CM Punk and AEW, it's going to generate more bad than good moving forward. You know, it's kind of like Bret Hart, his post Montreal Screwjob era, you know, where it was often referenced. You know, they referenced it, you know, early on in AEW when WCW, excuse me, when he returned. I know it's hard for wrestling fans to let go of things. I know it's hard for wrestlers to let go of things as well, but we do have to move on from this. You know, the more we stick around with the Punk scenarios in AEW, the more out of place it's going to feel, the stranger it's going to look like, and more importantly, you know, CM Punk has moved on. He's moved on. I think AEW should move on as well. I hope they do. I'd extend the same sentiment to pro wrestling fans, but you know, we're still arguing about the Montreal Screwjob and the Pontiac Silverdome decades after these events have happened. So I'm not holding my breath. Anyway, those are my thoughts. We're going to wrap it up for today. There'll be more of these quick thoughts coming in and out. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like this video as well. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time.